Welcome. Today we're going to be showing you the game that you'll be creating. The game is called Ghost Shooter. It's a top-down shooter game where you are, as the name describes, shooting ghosts. You can move with the arrows, try and avoid the ghosts, and as you shoot them you get more points. So we are going to walk you through how to create this game. The first step that you will be taking is actually creating a folder for your assets. Your assets are the images that are going to be put into your game. I have, as you can see, a folder on my desktop that I'm putting the Ghost Shooter assets in, and then in Canvas, or if you are not able to access Canvas, you can also go to this website, and there's a tutorial there that will walk you through this. It is a little outdated, so we are updating it with this video. So once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and open each of these and download them and store them in your folder. So if I go here, I'm going to show in folder, and then I'm going to go ahead and just drag that right into. There we go. So do that with the rest of the folders, or the rest of the files, and then you should be good to go. So we will simply click next and open up our bullet. Do the same thing. Just drag and drop. And now one trick that we'll show you is how to do a split screen. So if I drag my cursor over to the edge until it makes that symbol right there, you'll see that then it pops it up in half screen. So now I can work on my other side of the screen, keeping that open. So here's your background. We're going to do the same thing, download that. And then we can just drag it right into here and go to next. And okay. And lastly, our explode. And that's it. Okay. Now that we are finished with that, we can close out this window, and we are actually going to open Construct 2. So if you come down to your toolbar here and type in Construct, it should pop up. Some of you will have this on your desktop. If you do not have it, you'll need to install it at home. You will need to make sure that you have the same version at home that you were working on at school. And you'll need to talk with your teacher about that. Otherwise, your game will not play at school, because you will more than likely download a newer version than the one we have on the computers at school. Now let me take you on a quick tour of Construct 2. In here, there are a few things that you're going to need to know. This is where the properties, this bar on the left is where the properties of your objects are going to be. So you'll be able to learn about each of the items that are in the game there. Over here, these can be rearranged. There's projects. I'm going to go ahead and stack this on top over here. Just by, as I click on it and drag, it creates these pop-ups where I can then move things around. And so I want my projects on top. There's a layers tab and a projects tab here. We'll get into those in more detail later. And then up here, you can click on top left, you can click on view, and the items that you need turned on are status bar, properties bar, project bar, layer bar, and object bar. I have tile map. I'm going to go ahead and click there to turn that off, and that disappeared. Now, as we get into creating our game, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on File and come down to New. This will open up a pop-up, and we're going to go ahead and click New Empty Project. You can double click on it, or you can click Open. Either one will work. Now, first thing, once we've got this open, is we are going to save it. And each time you save, we recommend that you save as a single file. So if I come in and say save as a single file, and I'm going to go ahead and save it onto my desktop. And I'm going to put it in my Ghost, well, I'll just create a new one. So we're going to go ahead and say Ghost Shooter, and save that. Now each day when you're done, what you'll want to do is put a new date on the end of it. So if I'm going to save it new today, I would go save as a single file. I can type that, I can click on that, and then just back up there and say 3/14/18, or you could just do 3/14. The reason we do that is if you lose your progress for a day, you're only going to have to go back one day to find a new file. So each day save a new one. I would save them in a folder on your desktop or in Dropbox, wherever you prefer. Now we're going to go ahead and come into File tab here at the top, and we're going to scroll down to Preferences. We want to set some preferences up. And the main one we want to focus on right now is our autosave. Make sure it's turned to enable autosave, and your frequency will probably be at 20 minutes. Go ahead and turn it up to 5 minutes. And then come to backup, and you can choose the location where you want to have daily backups. Okay, and so you can say you want it on your desktop, in your Ghost Shooter assets folder, and then you will have a backup and frequency. You can say whatever you prefer, but I would say every 30 minutes, and then click OK. This way, if you do forget to save, you should have a backup saved automatically for you. Now that we're done with that, let me show you a couple more things. Right here we have two tabs. One is the layout, two is the event sheet. This is where you will lay everything out, your images and so forth. And then over here in the event sheet is where you will do the programming. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to add a background to our layout. So in order to do this, you can double click on the layout, or if you don't want to do that, you can right click and come down to insert a new object. Either one works. Next, you're going to scroll down, because we are doing a background. We're going to use a tiled background. What a tiled background will do is it will put an image in there that as you scroll, it will just duplicate the image over and over again. So we're going to use a tiled background. We're going to say insert. We're just going to click on our background somewhere, and then it pops up our image editor. And in this, we're going to go ahead and select the image we want. So I'm going to come to my desktop, go to my Ghost Shooter assets, and lo and behold, we have a background we will use. Now we're going to go ahead and size that so that it fits our gameplay space. So I'm going to go ahead and close here by clicking in the top right hand corner, and there's our image. Now if I click around somewhere else on accident, I click over here, you'll notice the properties window over here changes. I need to make sure I'm clicked on my image here, and it will show tiled background and give me all the properties of the image that I've clicked on. The properties that I'm most interested in right now are position first, and so I'm going to click up in position. I'm just going to hit 0, 0 and hit enter and see what that does. Now notice how it took it up to the top left hand corner of my play space. My play space originates at 0, 0. So every time I add something on, let's say I add 10 to this, it's going to shift it 10 pixels down. So I just want to have this at, if I put it on the X coordinate, which is the first one, it would shift it 10 pixels to the right. So I'm just going to put 0 there again, and it's up in the top hand corner. Now, I want the size to be the same size as my window here, and it should be, my game size window should be 1280 by 1024. Now, I want to survey this and see if I'm correct. So I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, and I'm going to use the track wheel on my mouse, or if I'm on a pad, I'm going to just scroll. I'm going to scroll out and see. Okay, so my default was different. If you look here, my window, my game window, is actually 1708 by 960. So I'm going to change that to match 1280. And the way I got to this was by clicking on the white part there that was hanging out. And so I'm changing that to 1280 by 1024. And now they both match. So if I click back on here, and you can see that they match. Now if I happen to drag that off there on accident, the easiest way to get it back is just come back over that position and 0, 0. Now that we have that done, we're going to keep it from sliding around like this by, put that back, going over to our layers. Now, you might be on projects. If so, that's fine. This will give you all the information on the different items in your game. We're going to make sure we click on the Layers tab for right now. And you notice it starts with layer 0. Here's what these layers are. Imagine they're like sheets of glass, and we can create a layer, and then we can paint on that, and if we want, we can throw another layer on top of that, and then we can paint on that. And so right now we only have one layer. So we're going to go ahead and add another layer. And at any point, I can see what layer my paintings are on, or my assets are on, by clicking on the asset and looking over here. This is on layer 0. If I wanted to, I could switch it to layer 1. But we're going to leave it on layer 0. Make sure you switch it back to layer 0. That is our bottom layer. And then we're going to come over here and click the pencil. Make sure we're clicked on layer 0. Click the pencil, and we are going to go ahead and type background. Okay. And then we don't want the background moving around on us all the time. It's there. We're not going to do anything with it. So we're just going to leave that, and we're going to lock it. Now, if I click on this, I can't move it anymore. It's stuck. Now, I have layer 1 here, and if I click on layer 1, anything new that I add to this is going to then be added to layer 1. So it will appear on top of this. Now, if I had my background on layer 1, and then I clicked back on my background and added something to my background, then it may not appear because it would be behind that background. So make sure you click on layer 1. We're going to add our next set of assets to layer 1. The other thing to quickly note is that if you happen to click the check mark by one of the layers, it turns it off, so you can't see it anymore. So if that happens, just click the check mark again and it will come right back to life. Now we're going to add some more assets. The first thing we're going to do, so I'm just going to double click again, pops up my assets. We want to be able to have our game recognize a couple of items. We want it to recognize the mouse, so I'm just going to click on the mouse. You can click insert or double click. And then I'm also going to do the same. I'm going to double click to open that again. I'm going to come here, and I also want the keyboard so that I can move him around and aim and focus with the mouse. So I'm going to double click or click and hit insert, either way. Now, if I look over here in projects, I have the keyboard and the mouse and the tiled background that are all inserted in here. That will allow the computer, or our game, to recognize the mouse and the keyboard. And so the next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to double click, and we're going to insert a sprite. And once we do that, I'm just going to click anywhere. It opens up our editor again. Click the load image from file, and let's go ahead and insert our player. Now that I've done that, I will go ahead and close this, but just before I do that, this will come in handy later. This is your animations. You can set up different animations to say if it was a more complex game to have them walk, jump, slide, whatever. And then down here is your animation frames, whereas you do your future games, you will create different images in here or import different images into here, and you will be able to make more complex games that way. But we're going to go ahead and save him by closing that box, and we're going to insert a new object. This time I right clicked, inserted a new object. I'm going to hit sprite and click in here. Doesn't matter where you click for now. And then open up, and we're going to put our bullet in. And that's that. And then we're going to insert a new object again. Go to sprite, click here, and we will add our monster. And I'm actually going to go ahead and drag my bullet out of the screen. That will make sense later, but go ahead and do that for now. And then we're going to insert our last object for now, and we're going to do a sprite. And we will put our explode. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and drag our explode off screen, and this will again make sense later on. But as you notice over here, everything is labeled sprite, except for our tiled background. So what we want to do is we want to rename those. And there's multiple ways to do it, but what I'm going to do is click on sprite there. You can right click and come down to rename, and I can name this player, and I can name this one. The other way to do it is you can click on it and then come over here to its properties. This shows us all the properties of our bullet, and we can just click up here on name and rename it bullet. Okay, and notice how it changes over here now to bullet player, and then we will go ahead and name this one ghost. So we'll come down here and say rename ghost, and then we will do this one like we did our bullet, and we will highlight it there and then come over to its properties. Again, you'll want to remember where the properties are, so that's why we were doing this, and we will name this explosion. Okay. Now that we have all the objects in our game, it's time to add some functionality. Now, one of the nice things about Construct 2 is that they have created some different behaviors. So if I clicked on bullet over here, now if I come over to its properties bar, I can see that there are behaviors here. I'm going to click on behaviors, and it gives me some pre-packaged behaviors. So it'll make the bullet do certain things. So if I look here, some of the ones that we will use is bound to layout. It will not allow anything that item to leave the layout. There's also destroy outside of layout, which can be handy for the bullet. We'll go ahead and add that one to the bullet. And then I'm going to add another one. What that will do is if you don't put that one in there, as a bullet is shot out of the screen, it will continue to be tracked by the computer's processing unit, and so it can actually bog down a computer and make the game play slower if you do not add that. So we're also going to add to the bullet, oh my goodness, look here, there is a bullet functionality. So we will add that, and now that will make the bullet actually move like a bullet. Now to show you that, I'm going to pull this down here and put it right next to our player, and then we're going to click on the player, and we're going to go ahead and add his behaviors now, and then we'll test them. So I'm going to click on the player, and one of the things we want is we don't want the player running off into space, so we're going to go ahead and bound him to the layout, and then click bound to layout there. And then we want him to be able to move. So you can look down here and see, which ones do I want him to use for his movement? And we are going to go ahead and say 8 direction is our optimal one, since this is a top-down shooter. and then we're going to click on that, and if you come up here to the top, you can run layout. If we click run layout, this will open it up, and you see our bullet shooting out of the screen there, and then I can move him around, and he cannot leave the layout. There's one more item we want to add to him, because if you notice, he can go off the screen, and we don't want that. So we're going to go ahead and add one more behavior to him. And so as I click on that, if you look here, what do you think might keep him from going out of our vision? Let's try scroll 2. Okay, there goes our bullet. And since we put scroll 2 on, now it stays with him. Now we're going to go ahead and add our behaviors to the rest. I'm going to move this over here so that we can at least see these initially, and then we'll move them back off the screen again. So for our monster, we're going to go ahead and give the monster a bullet behavior. It's just going to come straight at us. Okay. And then we want our explosion to have a fade behavior so that it doesn't stay bright like that, it just fades away over time. So let's see, there's the fade. Okay, now let's click play. And as you notice, the explosion faded, and our bullet and our monster raced off the screen. Now, with that, we don't want our bullet to be the same speed as our monsters, so we're going to go ahead and give our bullet over here in properties. If you click on bullet and then come over to properties, and I just drag the bullet off the screen again so that as we get further into the game, we don't have to worry about having this random bullet appear out of nowhere. So we're going to go ahead and give the bullet a speed of 600, and then we're going to give our ghost a much slower speed, otherwise it'd be hard to run away from them. So we're going to give our ghost a speed of 80. And then last but not least, we're going to set the fade on our explosion. We want that to be slower, so we're going to, instead of 1, we're going to do 0.5, and that will create a little, actually a little quicker fade out time. So now we're going to go ahead and move the explosion off the screen, and it's time to move this ghost a little further away, and then we're going to create more instances of this. We want more monsters on here. 1-to-1 doesn't make for a very exciting game. So by holding control, then click and dragging on the monster object, it will spawn another instance. So if you can watch, I hold down control and then I click on it and drag out another instance. And now I have 2 instances of the same monster object type. So object types are essentially classes of objects. In the event system, you mainly deal with object types. For example, you might make an event that says bullet collides with monster, and this actually means any instance of the bullet object type colliding with any instance of the monster object type, as opposed to having to make a separate event for each and every monster. With sprites, all instances of an object type also share the same texture. This is great for efficiency. When players play your game online, rather than having to download 8 monster textures for 8 monsters, they only need to download 1 monster texture and construct 2 repeats at 8 times. We'll cover more on object types versus instances later, but for now, a good example to think about is different types of enemies are different object types. Then the actual enemies themselves, which there might be several of, are instances of those object types. So here we're going to actually create 7 or 8 instances of this monster. So just hold down control again and click and drag, and then hold down control, click and drag, control, click and drag. And we are at 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, now if you look over here, we still only have one object, which is the ghost, but we have 7 instances of that object. Actually 8. So now we're going to go ahead and start customizing this, and in order to do that, we are going to click on the event sheet. Okay, as you click on the event sheet, this is where we list the events or the different things that we're going to tell the game to do. So we can create more event sheets, and we will do that eventually, but we'll save that for the next tutorial. So for now, what happens is when we add an event, it will pop up, open a pop-up, and we can create different events, and they will tie back to the objects on our layout. And Construct2 runs everything in the event sheets once per tick. And you might ask what a tick is. Well, most monitors update their displays 60 times per second. So Construct2 will try to match that for the smoothest display. This means that the event sheet is usually run 60 times per second, each time followed by redrawing the screen. It's what a tick is. 1 unit of the run the events, then draw the screen. And the events run top to bottom. So the event at the top of this sheet, the first one we insert here, will be the first item run. And events consist of conditions which test if certain criteria are met. For example, is the spacebar down? If all these conditions are met, the event's actions are all run. So, example, if you create a bullet object, after the actions have run, any sub-events are also run. So these can then test more conditions, then run more actions, then more sub-events, and so on. And this will make sense as we get into it more. Using this system, we can build sophisticated functionality for our games and apps, and we won't need sub-events in this tutorial at this point. So let's go over that again. In short, an event basically runs like this. If all conditions are met, then it will run the event's actions. If they're not met, then it'll go on to the next event. So let's go ahead and create our first event. So we want the player to always look at the mouse, and it'll look like this when we're done. We're going to click on System, and then we're going to look for every tick. I know where it is, but if I don't, I can just come up here and type in EVE every tick. Okay, so that means every time that screen refreshes, it's going to do this, whatever I tell it. And so we're going to click on Add Action, and we want the player to angle towards the mouse. So we're going to go ahead and click Player, and then I want to set the angle of the player toward our mouse's position. So I'm going to choose Set Angle Toward Position, and double click on that, and now it gives me an XY coordinate. So now this gives us the option of where we want to have the mouse point or the player point, and we can set in an XY coordinate, or in this case, since we want to have it point at the mouse, we're going to go ahead and type in mouse, and if it starts to pop up like that, you can hit enter and it'll enter it there. And then I'm going to hit dot X. We want it to go to the X coordinate of the mouse, wherever the mouse is on the screen in the X coordinates, and then we're going to type in mouse. You probably guessed it. We want it to also look at its Y coordinate. So we're going to type Y. And now let's test that. So now he looks at wherever the mouse is. Okay. So we notice that that's working. If we go back here, I want to show you something real quick. Notice how when I open, I just double clicked on the expression so that I could change it. And so when I double clicked on that, notice how it pops up this little window. When I'm not hovering over it, it fades out. So if I wanted to, if I was doing this, I could, and I didn't know what expressions I could put in there, I can actually come hover over here and I can say, oh, I can reference any of these items. So I want the mouse and I want the X, and it'll also input it that way. And then I can hit done. So congratulations, you've just created your first custom functionality for this game. Okay, so now we're going to speed up a little bit here. And what we want to do now is we want to have bullets start to shoot from the gun. So in order to do that, we're going to add a new event, and we are going to click on the mouse. We want it to shoot when we click on the left button. So if we click here, and then the default is left button down, so you can change this from click to double click to whatever you want, but we're going to leave it on clicked. Finish. Okay, and then we want the action we want the player to spawn a bullet. Okay, so if we type in spawn another object, and I just put in SP and spawn another object came up. So when we click on the mouse, the player is going to spawn another object. And what object that is, well, let's click on the click to choose and double click on bullet. Now the player will spawn a bullet. And we're going to go ahead and leave the layer and image point for now as is, except for we want the layer to be layer 1. So we want it to be on top of the background. Okay, and so we can now say done. And if we test that, let's see if it works. So now we have our player, and if we shoot, notice that his bullet is coming out of his forehead roughly. So we might want to fix that. So we can do that simply by clicking on the player here, or we could go back into the layout. Either way, double click on him there, or we can click here, right click, and edit animations. That opens back up our editor. I'm going to close that and show you how, if I was here, I could just double click on him. Opens up the same thing. Now, once we're in there, we want to look over here, and as you scroll over items, it tells you what they do. Okay, this is our origin or image points. And if you notice, when we set this up, we identified what image point we wanted as we were setting up the shoot bullet command. So we're going to add a new image point, and when it does that, see how we have one with the crosshair and one that's a square. We're going to set, if I have this one highlighted, I can click anywhere I want. I want the bullet to come right out of the tip of the gun, so I'm going to click on the edge of that. Now, with that done, I can go back into my event sheet, and I can double click on my code here, and it opens it up, and now I have image point. And if I put in image point 1 instead of 0, let's see what happens. So now it should look like this. And if we click run, now it looks like it's coming out of the gun. You might say it looks like it's coming out a little too far away from the gun, but we're a lot better. So we can play with that image point a little bit if we want and tighten it up. Alright, now let's make our bullets kill monsters. So we're going to come back to our event sheet, click add event, and we're going to, we want our bullet when it collides with something. So we're going to say on collision with another object. So now on collision with another object, and we're going to pick the monster or our ghost. Okay, and once we've clicked that, we can say done. And then the action we're going to add to this is we want our monster, our ghost, to be destroyed. So we're going to go ahead and click on destroy. So we should look like this when we're done. And then we also want one more, we want to add another event. And actually, sorry, we want to add another action. And we don't want our bullet to keep going. We want it to spawn. First, we want it to spawn another object. And that object is going to be an explosion, so that when it hits the ghost, it looks like it explodes. And we want that on layer 1. So we're going to type in layer 1 there. And we're done. And then the last thing we want is, as we talked about before, we want the bullet to destroy itself, so that it doesn't look like it kept going. So there we go. Now, if we try and run that, one of the problems we're going to have is trying to catch up with a ghost. So if we come down here, because they're all going to be shooting off that direction, and run our layout, let's see if we can actually get one. So there we go. But we don't really like the black background. So we're going to clean that up a little bit here. And this is how we do it. So if we come back to our game here and we click on the explosion object, in the object bar, or in the properties bar over here, it appears in the properties bar at the bottom. You can set the blend mode property to additive. So we're going to go ahead and select additive here. And what that will do is add each pixel on the screen incrementally. So the dart with the black is a 0 pixel value, so nothing gets added. You don't see the black background. But brighter colors add more, so they appear more strongly. It's great for explosions and lighting effects and things like that. So right now, the monsters just wander off the layout to the right. Let's go ahead and make them a bit more interesting. First of all, let's go back to our event sheet, and let's start them from a random angle. So we are going to add another event, and we are going to use the system and on start of layout. So when the layout starts, we want this to happen. We are going to go ahead and set an action, and we want the ghost, and then we are going to set its angle of motion. So we'll click on this, and then we want to go ahead and type in here random, and then in parentheses 360. So again, we're just going to type in random, and as that comes up, we can double click and open up parentheses, and this will give us a range. So we want them to be able to go any direction. So we're going to do 360. We could put 180. We could put whatever we want, but we're going to go ahead and put in 360, and then let's test it out. And they're just randomly wandering. And now notice our nice little fade effect. Now, they will still wander off forever when they leave the layout, never to be seen again. So let's keep them inside. What we'll do is point them back at the player when they leave the layout. This does two things. They always stay within the layout, and if the player stands still, monsters come right for them, which makes it a lot harder. So we're going to come back to our game over here, and we're going to click on Add Event and our ghost. And when they are outside of layout, so it is outside layout. So anytime the ghost goes outside layout, we want them to set an action, And we're going to say ghost set angle toward position. And then we're going to go ahead and for the X, we're going to say we want to go towards the player. So let's start typing in player, and lo and behold, we've got player, and we're going to say dot X. So we're going to send it towards that player's X coordinate. And then we want to do the same thing with the player's Y coordinate. So we type in player and then dot Y. Okay. Now let's see how that works. So first they run away, but pretty soon, once they go off the layout, they're going to respawn. Oh, we've actually got and come right towards us. So now let's just increase the level of difficulty. Now, suppose we want to shoot a monster 5 times before it dies, let's say, rather than instant death like it is at the moment. So how would we do that? If we only store 1 health counter, so we only have 1 spot to store health, then once we've hit a monster 5 times, all the monsters will die. Instead, we need each monster to remember its own health. So we want to give each monster their own health, and we do that with an instance variable. Instance variables allow each monster to store its own health values. So a variable is simply a value that can change or vary, and they are stored separately for each instance, hence the name instance variable. So let's add a health instance variable to our monster. What we want to do is we want to click on our monster. I'm going to go to layout. You can also do it just by clicking on our ghost over here, and you're going to come over to the properties since we've clicked on our ghost, and we are going to look for instance variables. They're right up here. We click on that and add a new one. So again, to add a new one, you just click on the plus sign right up there, and then we're going to go ahead and label this health. And when creating a variable or coding, how you label things matters. So if I put in a capital H, E-A-L-T-H for health, I have to make sure I reference this with a capital H. Or if I do lowercase, which I'll do in this case, H-E-L-T-H, then I need to make sure I do it with lowercase. Now, since we're going to store a number in here, we're going to go ahead and leave this on number. I could do Boolean, which we'll talk about at a later point in time, which is kind of a true or false type of a statement. So an off or on, whatever the case may be. Or I could put in text, and then it would hold in some form of text, left, right, up, down. But we're going to do number, and we're going to put the initial value as 5. So now you have to shoot these 5 times, and you could put in optional description here if you wanted, but we're going to go ahead and save it as that. What that will do is now we'll have to shoot, once we assign this, we're going to actually have to shoot the monster 5 times in order to kill it. Furthermore, if you look over here, now under instance variables, we have the variables showing up there with the amount that we assigned it. And so if I click on this, I can change that. I could say I only want to be shot 3 times before they're destroyed. We'll go ahead and leave it at 5 for now. Okay. Since I clicked on the screen, that instant variable went away. I can click back on the ghost, and we see its properties right there. So let's go ahead and click back on the event sheet. And right now we're destroying the ghost as soon as the bullets hit them. So let's change that to subtract 1 from its health. So find the event that reads bullet on collision with monster or ghost. So we're right here. So on collision with ghost, and we're going to come over to the monster or the ghost destroy part here. And if we right click on the action, we can say replace action. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to edit this action. And what we want to do is we want to click on the ghost, and we want to subtract 1 from health. So we're going to go ahead and type in subtract, and notice it comes up in the instance variable section, subtract from an instance variable. We double click on that, and it's already set up health value 1. We can click done, and now every time we shoot the ghost, their health will decrease by 1. So now the health will decrease by 1, but we don't have anything telling the actual ghost to be destroyed since we took that out. So there will be an explosion, the bullet will destroy, health will go down, but we now need to create another event. And in that event, we're going to choose the ghost, and we're going to reference the instance variable. So we're going to go ahead and type in compare, and we want to compare the instance variable. There are a lot of things we could compare here, but we want to compare and see how many lives are left. So we're going to have the computer look at, and this, again, this is every 60 times essentially a second. It's going to be looking at this, and we're going to say the health is equal to, and we actually want it to be, less than or equal to 0. So as soon as the health gets to 0, we want something to happen. And that thing that we want to have happen is we want the monster, or the ghost, to go ahead and spawn. So we're going to type in spawn, another object. We want it to spawn an explosion on layer 1. And then we also want the ghost to be destroyed. So we're going to click on add action on ghost and destroy. Now, you may ask, why did we do less than or equal to 0? Well, let's say that later on you get a little crazy and you decide to add another weapon or a rocket that destroys 2 or 3 or 4 health at a time. What if your health was below 0, say -2, -3? That allows it to be destroyed no matter what the number is on health, as long as it's less than 0 or equal to. So let's go ahead and run this and see how it goes. Now, I destroyed that one. 5 shots, destroyed that one. And I am working on a trackpad, so you'll have to excuse me. It's not really easy to navigate, and because I can't run and shoot at the same time. So there we go. It's working. So let's go ahead and add a score now. So, you might, we'll need another variable for this. You might think, let's put the score as one of the player's instance variables. It's not a bad first idea, but remember the value is stored in the object. If there are no instances, there are no variables either. So if we destroy the player, we can no longer tell what their score was because it was destroyed with the player. So instead, we can use what's called a global variable. Like an instance variable, a global variable, or just global, can store text or a number. Each variable can store a single number or a single piece of text. So global variables are also available to the entire game across all the layouts. So if we create other levels or whatever, it's globally available, hence the name. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and right-click the space at the bottom of the event sheet down here in the opening, and as you see here, there's a global variable option. So we click add global variable, enter score as the default, and let's see, the other defaults are okay because we've got number, the initial value is 0, so we're good on all of those. Click OK, and as you notice, it comes in right up here at the top. Let's go ahead and give the player a point for killing a monster or a ghost. So In our ghost health section right here, let's go ahead and add another action, and we're going to say system, and we want to add 1 to score. So I'm going to type add and see how we have the global, and there are things called local variables. We'll get into that in another tutorial, but we're going to go ahead and click add to, and score, add 1 to score. Everything by default is good there. Click done, and there we go. Now our player has a score which increases by 1 for every monster they kill, but we can't see their score. So let's show it to them with the text object. So we're going to create a heads-up display first of all. First time I ever saw this was on a Corvette, and it basically projected the speed limit and some other things up on the windshield in front of the driver, so as they're driving they could see that in front of where they're driving. They've taken them away since then, but that's what a heads-up display does, is it keeps something in front of you wherever you go. And so by default, that way as our player moves around the screen, the score is going to stay on the screen. So by default, the layers scroll, and to keep them on the screen, we can use the layer parallax setting, and a parallax allows different layers to scroll at different rates for a sort of semi-3D effect. If we set the parallax to 0, though, the layer won't scroll at all, which is ideal for a HUD. So we're going to go back to the layers bar we used earlier and add a new layer called HUD. So if we click over here on layers, we're going to add a new layer, and we're going to click on that layer and type HUD, H-U-D. Okay. And then what we want to do is we want to go over to the properties bar over here, and as you see there's a parallax setting. If we put that to 0, 0, now that setting will keep whatever's put on that layer right at the same place as you put it on that layer in front of you as you play the game. So let me show you what I mean. So if we go back to layout, and I'm going to move my player right back up here, and then I'm going to double click, and we're going to go ahead and add a text item. So I'm going to double click on text. I'm going to put it right up here by my player, and as we notice, the text is actually, if we scroll in on that, you can see that the text is black, which isn't very noticeable. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and come over to our properties bar on our text, and we are going to make a couple of adjustments here. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and change the color. And there's lots of different ways to do this, but you can just pick one of these if you want, or there are other ways to do it as well. I'm going to go ahead and pick that yellow, and then we can also make some other adjustments here. So we can come into font, click on that, and we can make it bold. And let's increase the font size. You can play with this as you see fit. I'm going to go ahead and try 24. Now, as you can see, it disappeared, but the reason is because my box was too small. So I'm going to adjust my box, make sure it's got plenty of room to keep the score in there, and then we should be good to go. I might actually even, let's see, let's add some italic on it. So make it a little more stylized. Now let's go ahead and switch back to the event sheet. And let's keep the text updated with the player score. So in the every tick event we added earlier, right here, we're going to add an action. And that action we're going to add is, as we can see, the text is here now. So we're going to click on that, and we're going to type in set text. We want to set text, and we're going to put in there, we're going to type in open parentheses score, and make sure you spell it the same way. So if you used an uppercase S, make sure you use that. Score, and I'm actually going to put a colon there, close parenthesis, and then we're going to put in and sign, which is Shift 7, and then we're going to type in score again. Okay, and so when we put something in quotations, that actually treats it as just a string in programming, or it just treats it as text. So it'll show score colon, and then when we put in the and, now we're actually saying in the code, look at score and put whatever's in that global number score in that spot. So we're done with that. The and that we put in there joins those two together. So let's see if it did it in our game. Let's see how this shows. Oh, we got score. Let's see if we can get a point. We got a point. All right. It's working. Okay. So we're nearly done. Let's add some finishing touches. So firstly, let's have some monsters regularly spawning. Otherwise, once you've shot all the monsters, there's nothing left to do. You get pretty bored. So we'll create a new monster every 3 seconds. So we're going to go back here, and we're going to add a new event. And we're going to use system. And then we want to do every X number of seconds. And we're going to put that interval at 3. And we're done, and then we're going to add an action to that. And that action is going to be another system action, and we're going to do create an object. Then we want to choose our ghost. All right, and we're going to put them on layer 1, and then let's see. We put 1400 for X, and we're going to do random for Y. We're going to go ahead and type in random, and then we're going to give it a range 1024, so it can come anywhere on the Y spectrum. Okay, so then we hit done. And so the X coordinate is just off the right edge of the layout, and the random 1024 is a random Y coordinate, the height of the layout, so it can come from anywhere there. So let's have some ghosts now. Let's get them to kill the player. So right now there's no way for you to die. So we're going to go ahead and add an event, and we're going to have the ghosts, and we want them when they collide. So we're going to do on collision with another object. So when they run into you as the player, you want something to happen. And oops, cancel that. And what we want to have happen is, let's add an action, and we want you to destroy. So next, if we type in destroy. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. All right, see if we can get a point. Oh, not yet. Okay, score still works. They're starting to spawn and come at us. Okay, now let's see if they can take us out. All right, terrific. Congratulations, you have finished your first game in Construct 2. Go ahead and save as a single file. Remember, come over here, click File, save as a single file. You're going to go ahead and put, come in here and just put in today's date. We'll say maybe today's date changed and it's now the 15th. Save, and then you can submit that to your instructor on Canvas. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy programming. Lastly, though, if you do want to learn more about programming, make sure you sign up for the Intro to Computer Programming class, where we create more video games, and or AP Computer Science. Thank you, and have a great day.